The sun had already set when the long-haul flight took off from the coastal city. Heading across the ocean to a distant country, the plane was full, carrying families, business travelers, and some tired tourists just trying to make it home. It seemed like an ordinary flight, quiet, smooth, and calm. A girl sat in seat 21A, alone but calm. Her eyes didn't wander much. She had a small bag in her lap and headphones plugged in. People didn't notice her much. She looked like any other quiet traveler, wearing a hoodie and keeping to herself. The flight attendants moved through the aisles, offering snacks and drinks. Some passengers watched movies, some read books, and others simply closed their eyes to rest. Nothing felt out of place, no one had any reason to worry. But 3 hours into the journey, a sharp voice came over the intercom. It was the captain. He announced there had been a slight issue with one of the navigation systems. It wasn't dangerous, but they were following protocol and contacting air traffic control for support. People looked up from their seats but didn't panic. After all, the captain sounded calm. The plane shifted direction slightly and some people started whispering, wondering why the route map had changed. The screen showed a slight reroute, not towards the destination, but curving northward again. No big alarm was raised. But a few nervous eyes glanced out the windows, searching the dark sky. Then came another announcement. This time, the captain's voice was different. He was slower, careful with his words. He mentioned a communication issue, not from inside the plane but from outside for reasons unknown. The aircraft wasn't receiving standard clearance signals anymore from nearby radar stations. That meant they were flying without real-time confirmation from ground control. A cold wave spread across the cabin. It wasn't fear just yet, but something felt off. Flight attendants were told to stay seated and secure their belts. That's when whispers turned into concern, especially for parents traveling with children. The girl in seat 21A didn't move, but her eyes opened slowly. She leaned to the side and glanced out the window. The sky was pitch black, but her focus was sharp. She pulled something out of her small bag. Not a phone or a book, but a simple patch sewn into cloth. The patch had a symbol, 2 small wings and a number beneath. Another hour passed and the cabin was silent. The air was tense, people clutched armrests. A few tried to smile, pretending nothing was wrong, but fear grew slowly. Like a shadow climbing the walls, suddenly, 2 massive fighter jets appeared on either side of the commercial plane. People gasped, some children started crying. Cameras came out, clicking photos through the windows. There they were, F-22 Raptors gliding silently in the night, escorting the commercial flight without explanation. No one knew what was happening. The captain didn't explain. The radio was quiet, and so were the F-22s. They didn't break formation, didn't flash signals, didn't respond to anything. They were simply there, like ghosts in the sky inside the cockpit. The co-pilot was visibly stressed. He tried reaching out again and again to ATC, but no response came. The plane was flying blind in one of the world's most restricted zones, and yet no instructions, no landing clearance, no help. Back in the cabin, a quiet voice spoke for the first time. It came from the girl in seat 21A. She stood up slowly, her voice calm but clear. She said something that didn't quite make sense to the people around her. "I need to speak to the pilot. Now." A flight attendant moved toward her, trying to stop her politely, but the girl didn't raise her voice or argue. Instead, she reached into her hoodie and pulled out a small card, worn at the edges but still readable. The attendant froze when she saw it, eyes wide. She nodded and immediately moved to open the cockpit door. No one knew what was going on, but something had shifted. The girl entered the cockpit and closed the door behind her. A few moments passed. Then something strange happened. The lead F-22 blinked its wing lights in a specific pattern. 121, a code. People stared out their windows. Confused, what did that mean? Why now? And why had the jets broken formation slightly? Inside the cockpit, the captain listened closely as the girl leaned forward and said just one sentence. She didn't shout, didn't beg, she simply said, "Call sign Echo 12 Blue is requesting identity verification." The silence that followed was deep. For a second, the pilot and co-pilot thought it was a joke. But then, the radio crackled for the first time that night. The F-22s broke radio silence. The voice that came through the cockpit's radio was not ordinary. It was firm, clear, and belonged to someone with authority. "Echo 12 Blue. Confirm identity with last 3 of mission code," the voice said. The captain glanced at the girl, unsure what to say or do. The girl didn't hesitate. Her fingers moved to the inside of her jacket, where she had tucked away a folded strip of paper. She unfolded it carefully and read the last 3 numbers aloud. 97 Delta. There was a moment of silence. A pause that felt like the air had frozen in the cockpit. Then came the response. Echo 12 Blue verified, and just like that, the air shifted. The 2 fighter jets outside suddenly changed their flight pattern. The lead F-22 moved slightly upward and circled once above the plane. It was not a maneuver meant for show. It was recognition. A signal only few would understand back in the cabin. Passengers were whispering more loudly now. Some were recording everything on their phones, trying to catch glimpses of what was happening outside. The F-22s were no longer just silent watchers. Now they were guiding the aircraft, flying in a protective formation, like bodyguards around a high-value target. The captain leaned back in his seat, looking at the girl standing beside him. He didn't ask questions, not yet, but his eyes held respect. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm not allowed to say everything," she replied softly. "But I used to be part of a program, not military. Not civilian either." The co-pilot turned toward her, curious but cautious. "Then why are they here for you?" he asked. She looked down at her hands, then toward the flashing controls on the dashboard. "There's a protocol," she said. "If my call sign is activated during a blackout flight path, the Raptors are deployed without question." "But how?" the captain asked. "You're just a passenger on a commercial flight." The girl nodded slowly. "I was taken off the grid 2 years ago. My file was marked inactive, but the code remains alive for emergencies." The captain looked at her for a long time. He didn't know if she was telling the full truth, but something about her tone, her calmness, her exact answers, it all felt real. Then the cockpit radio crackled again. This time the voice was different, deeper, older. "This is Command West. Echo 12 Blue, report full cabin status. Are there hostiles on board?" The captain looked at the girl. Unsure whether to answer, she spoke instead. "Cabin is secure, no hostiles. Possible electronic interference from external source. Request protected corridor." Again. The silence returned, a strange quiet, and then... "Confirmed. You are now under NORAD vector protection. Estimated escort time 42 minutes. Follow the Raptors." In the passenger cabin, people were beginning to feel the shift. The flight attendants had resumed moving, not in panic, but with quiet orders. They asked passengers to remain seated. Some handed out bottled water, trying to calm the nerves, but eyes kept looking at the windows, watching the silent fighter jets outside. A woman in row 12 whispered to her husband, "I think we're being rescued." Another passenger, an elderly man with a military hat, stared out the window and muttered, "I haven't seen a Raptor fly that close since I was young." In the back rows, a teenage boy posted a video online adding the caption, "Escorted by fighter jets, no clue why." This is wild. Within minutes it was being shared everywhere, and people on the ground began to notice something was up. Inside the cockpit, the girl remained standing. She wasn't nervous, but she wasn't fully relaxed either. Her hands remained near the armrest, her eyes tracking every light on the panel. She wasn't a pilot, but she understood flight paths and codes, at least enough to know they were being led toward a safe landing zone. The captain, once skeptical, now turned to her and asked, "Is there something more we should know before we land?" She paused, took a deep breath, and replied, "There might be." The engines hummed quietly as the plane followed the new course given by the fighter jets. Outside, the sky had begun to lighten just a little, a pale blue rising from the horizon, but inside, tension still sat thick in the air like invisible fog. The passengers didn't know everything, but they knew something strange was happening. A few brave voices had started asking the attendants direct questions. "Are we under attack? Why are we being escorted? Oh, is this plane in danger?" But the attendants had been told to stay calm and offer minimal answers. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, the girl remained standing. She kept her gaze steady on the front panel. Her presence wasn't loud, but it was heavy, like she didn't belong on a normal commercial flight, like she was part of something else. The captain turned back to her, his voice softer than before. "You said there might be more," he repeated. "What aren't you telling us?" The girl looked toward the co-pilot, then at the captain. Then she reached inside her coat again and pulled out a small black device. It looked like a key fob, but thicker, heavier. There were no buttons, just a flat surface and a small red light on the corner. "This wasn't supposed to activate," she said quietly. But when the communication blackout began, it triggered on its own. "What is it?" the co-pilot asked, keeping his hands off the controls but ready to react. "A location beacon," she replied. "Encrypted. It pings only one satellite, one that isn't supposed to be online unless a certain set of conditions are met." The captain didn't fully understand, but he knew enough to know this wasn't ordinary. "What kind of satellite?" he asked. The girl hesitated, then finally said, "Defense Level 7 Emergency Override Class. It's used when there's a possibility of compromised skies." "Compromised skies?" The co-pilot echoed, his brow furrowed. "Unfriendly tech," she whispered. "Interference that doesn't belong to any known national signal. Not from us, not from our allies." The captain went still. "Are you saying this blackout wasn't natural?" She nodded. "I believe we were being scanned. Maybe even tracked, not by people we know." Just then, the radio buzzed again. This time it wasn't NORAD. The voice was sharper, clearer, female. "Echo 12 Blue. Confirm presence of unregistered signal repeater on board." The girl responded immediately. "Confirmed. Unauthorized wave detected near the cargo hold. Low frequency, short range." The captain's hands tightened on the control wheel. "Are we carrying a tracker?" "No," she said. "Worse, and we might be carrying a device trying to jam radar from inside." Back in the cabin, two plain-clothed air marshals who had stayed quiet the whole flight stood up and walked swiftly toward the rear of the plane. They didn't announce anything, but the movement was sharp, trained, deliberate. Passengers turned in their seats. Watching, wondering, some began to panic. Whispering louder now. One man near the back tried to stand but was asked to sit by a calm but firm voice. A few minutes later, the marshals returned to the front of the plane carrying a small black case. The metal edges had burn marks on them, and one side was slightly dented. "We found this behind the last row," one of them said. "It was hidden behind the panel." The girl looked at it and nodded. "That's it." The device was placed on the floor of the cockpit carefully. The girl took out a cloth from her pocket and draped it over the case. The red light blinking on top finally went dark. "How did it get there?" the co-pilot asked. "No idea," she said. "But someone didn't want this plane to make it quietly." The radio buzzed again. "F-22 escort confirming second aircraft shadowing your path for last 70 miles. Everyone froze. "There's another plane?" the captain asked. The girl didn't answer right away. Her eyes were locked on the screen. She spoke finally, calm, but with a tone that sent chills across the cockpit. "That's not a plane," she whispered. "That's the reason they woke me up." The cockpit was filled with silence again, but it was the heavy kind, the kind that makes even breathing sound loud. The girl's words echoed in the air, even though she had said them quietly. "That's not a plane. That's the reason they woke me up." The captain leaned forward, trying to understand. "Woke you up from what?" he asked. The girl took a slow breath, her fingers slightly trembling now, though she tried to hide it. 2 years ago, I was part of a special test program. We monitored objects that didn't follow human flight patterns." The co-pilot looked shocked. "You mean drones?" "No," she said, looking him straight in the eyes. "I mean unidentified objects, not from any country." The air seemed to grow colder inside the cockpit. Outside, the fighter jets adjusted their positions again. They were closer now, and one of them had changed to a tighter escort angle, a protective shield rather than just a guide. Then the radar panel blinked. A new signal had appeared. It was small, fast-moving, and didn't match any known aircraft model. The girl pointed at the screen. "There, that's it. It's riding our signal trail." "What does that mean?" the captain asked, his voice tense. "It means our plane's electronic signature is being followed. Not because we're being chased," she explained, "but because they want to scan the people on board." "Scan?" the co-pilot asked. "Why?" She looked down for a second, then finally said it. "I wasn't just a listener in the program, I was part of the training experiment. They marked certain individuals for observation. I was one of them." The captain blinked, trying to take it all in. "So you're saying whatever that thing is, it came for you?" "No," she replied. "It came for the call sign. Echo 12 Blue wasn't just a title. It was a beacon, a flag, if they ever returned. The program would go dark, and anyone carrying the Echo code would be automatically flagged for retrieval." The co-pilot looked at her, eyes wide. "You weren't just on vacation." "Were you?" She didn't answer that, but her silence said more than any words could. Suddenly, the cockpit radio buzzed again. This time the voice came from one of the F-22s. Object approaching from 6 o'clock high. Velocity beyond Mach 3. No response to hails. Possible UAP? The captain asked, puzzled. The girl answered quickly. Unidentified aerial phenomenon. The next moment, the plane shook just slightly, like a soft bump from the air, but there was nothing in sight. The passengers in the cabin gasped. Some began to panic. A baby started crying, and the murmurs turned into frightened whispers. Back inside, the captain looked at the girl again. What happens now? We let them scan, she said, and we pray they don't find what they're looking for. Which is what? The co-pilot asked. She turned slowly to look through the cockpit window. Me. At that moment, the radar beeped again. The object was now directly behind the plane, keeping perfect distance, neither gaining nor falling back. One of the F-22s made a sharp move, circling to intercept, but within seconds, its signal dropped from the radar. Raptor 2 has gone dark, the radio announced. The captain sat up straighter, his hands tight on the control yoke. Did it go down? No, the girl whispered, staring at the fading radar. They shut it out. Whoever's behind this doesn't want conflict. They want silence, control. They want to make a point. A strange buzzing sound began to hum through the cockpit. Soft at first, then rising. It wasn't the engines. It wasn't mechanical. It was something else, like static but alive. The lights on the dashboard dimmed for a few seconds and then came back on. The girl reached into her pocket again and pulled out the patch with the wings and the number. She placed it on the console gently. If anything happens, tell command I was awake when they came, and I remembered everything. The co-pilot looked confused. What do you mean, remembered? She turned to him with steady eyes. Because I've seen them before. Inside the cockpit, the air had shifted. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was deep, almost unnatural, like something was pressing down on the entire plane from above. The girl stood completely still, her eyes focused on the radar screen as it blinked slowly, showing the strange object still following behind them. The captain didn't speak. He just looked at her, trying to piece together what she had meant. You've seen them before? He finally asked, his voice low. She nodded slowly. Not like this, not this close. But I remember one night during a test flight, we were monitoring the edge of restricted airspace. Something appeared on our screen. Silent, fast, and not like anything we had in our inventory. What did it do? The co-pilot asked. It hovered for exactly 14 seconds, she said. Then it vanished. But later that night, every device in our facility reset on its own. Files were deleted. Some of us had dreams we couldn't explain. The captain blinked. Dreams. Like signals in our heads, she whispered. Like something was trying to understand how we think, how we feel. The radio buzzed again. This time the voice was shaky, not from the Air Force, but from one of the marshals in the back of the plane. Captain, we have a situation. One of the passengers has collapsed after staring out the window. He's breathing, but unresponsive. The girl moved quickly, pushing the cockpit door open and stepping into the cabin. The passengers turned to look at her as she walked down the aisle, but she didn't make eye contact. Her focus was locked on row 28. A man in his 50s was slumped in his seat, eyes open but not blinking. A flight attendant was holding his wrist, trying to find a steady pulse. The marshal stepped back as the girl approached. She leaned down, whispered something to the man's ear very softly. Then she pulled out a penlight and flashed it in his eyes. They didn't react. He's in a soft trance, she said. His mind isn't here right now. What do you mean? The marshal asked. She looked up, her face calm but firm. They're testing us. Testing what? Our response, she said, our fear, our choices. How we protect one another. They're not attacking. They're learning. Suddenly the cabin lights dimmed again, but only for a second, and then returned to normal. People started murmuring louder, panic rising in their voices. A young boy began to cry in row 15, and his mother tried to comfort him. Her hands trembling, back in the cockpit. The co-pilot was trying to reach air control again. This is Flight 71 Echo requesting emergency clearance. Repeat, requesting emergency landing corridor. We have unknown external presence, possible cognitive interference. No response. The girl returned to the front of the cabin and re-entered the cockpit. We have to drop altitude slightly, she said. Not too much. Just enough to force a new signal lock from ground radar. If we shift patterns, we might confuse them or at least delay the scan. The captain nodded. We'll try it. as the plane tilted gently downward. The strange object on the radar flickered. Then, for the first time, it moved, but not away. Instead, it shot forward directly above the plane's nose and hovered there from the front windows. A soft glow became visible, a pale white light, not blinding but steady. It wasn't flashing like aircraft lights. It pulsed slow and alive. Like a heartbeat, no one on board screamed, but everyone felt it. A weight in their chest, a vibration in their teeth, a hum that touched the bones. It was like the air was no longer just air. It had awareness then, just as fast as it appeared. The light vanished. The radar went clear. The cockpit lights returned to normal. The girl stepped forward and whispered. That was a handshake. A what? The captain asked. A message, she said. They wanted to let us know they see us and... They've made their choice. What choice? He asked again. She looked out the window and answered. To let us land. The captain gently eased the controls as the aircraft continued its descent. The engines hummed steady, but the air inside the cockpit felt tighter with each passing minute. They were no longer just flying. They were being watched, studied, and now cleared. The radar screen was completely blank now. No trace of the object that had hovered so close. No sign of the second F-22 either. Just silence and sky. The girl sat quietly in the jump seat behind the pilots. Her face still, hands resting on her knees. But her eyes didn't blink much. She was waiting for something, not from the outside. But from within, the co-pilot broke the silence. So what happens when we land? She didn't answer right away. Then she spoke softly. Protocol will kick in. You'll be met by people who don't wear uniforms. They won't say where they're from. They'll ask for me. The captain turned. Are you going with them? She gave a half smile. I don't have a choice. In the cabin, people were still restless. A few tried to use their phones, but there was no service. Others just sat quietly, holding hands. Watching the clouds begin to form below the plane, the air felt different, like the world had shifted while they were in the sky. One of the air marshals walked down the aisle, whispering to the flight attendants, We're landing soon, keep them calm. No announcements about what happened. Back in the cockpit, the radio finally buzzed. A new voice. This one calm and professional. Flight 71 Echo. This is base control, you are clear to land. Emergency strip Bravo 3 is ready. Escort will disengage at 15,000 feet. The captain looked at the girl. That's not a normal tower frequency. She nodded. It's military deep operations wing. They've been waiting. The co-pilot checked the coordinates. We're not landing at the original airport. No, she replied. We're being diverted. They want to minimize attention. No media, no crowd. Just questions. As the plane dipped below the clouds, the passengers finally saw the ground again. But it wasn't a normal city skyline. It was a large airfield surrounded by fences, radar towers, and no commercial planes in sight. The lead F-22 pulled upward and vanished into the clouds. The second jet, the one that had gone dark and was nowhere to be seen. The captain announced calmly, Ladies and gentlemen, we will be landing shortly at a secure alternate airport for technical checks. Please remain seated and calm. Your safety is our priority. People looked at each other, worried but relieved to be landing. No one cheered, but there was a quiet kind of gratitude, like they knew they had come very close to something they couldn't explain. The wheels touched down with a smooth thump. The plane rolled down the runway, guided not by ground vehicles but by men in dark uniforms with no name tags. No logos, just black SUVs waiting quietly near the hangars. Once the engines powered down, the captain turned to the girl. Will you be okay? She looked out at the waiting vehicles, then back at him. I'll be gone before sunrise, and so will they. Who? The co-pilot asked. She stood up, brushed off her coat, and replied, The ones who scanned us, the ones who sent the light, they don't stay long, they just... check. The door opened, and the girl walked out first. Two people in black suits approached, one held a tablet. The other just nodded to her silently. No words, no greetings. She handed them the cloth-wrapped device from the cockpit without saying a word. One of them looked at the pilots and said only, This flight never happened. The passengers were kept inside for another 20 minutes before being allowed to disembark in small groups. Each person was guided into a separate shuttle, told they would be transported to the original city by ground for technical delay. No one was told the truth, and strangely, no one argued either. Something about the experience had changed them. made them more quiet, more reflective, like they had touched something beyond understanding. Back in the cockpit, the co-pilot looked out at the girl being led into a black van and whispered. She wasn't just a passenger. The captain, still holding the flight logbook in his hand, nodded. No, he said. She was the reason we all made it back. The sky was beginning to change color when the plane was finally empty. The passengers had all been quietly transported off the base. Their luggage had been scanned, tagged, and rerouted to other commercial flights. No one would receive an explanation and no one would ask for one. The captain sat alone in the cockpit, staring at the blank radar screen. It still felt unreal. The fighter jets, the strange object, the light that felt like it was looking back at them, and of course, the girl with the quiet voice and the call sign that made the world stop. He turned the worn logbook in his hands. Inside it, he had scribbled notes during the flight, some routine, some far from it. One page just had her call sign written over and over again. Echo 12 Blue, Echo 12 Blue, like it needed to be remembered even if they were told to forget. The co-pilot returned after stepping outside for air. The black van is gone, he said. She's not here anymore. Did they take her underground? The captain asked. No tunnels. The co-pilot replied. They just left. No markings on the vehicles, no ID badges. Just silence. The captain nodded slowly. That fits her. Outside, the sun was rising. But the light didn't feel warm yet. It felt distant, like the world was still waking up from a strange dream. A quiet knock came at the cockpit door. It was the air marshal. She left this, he said, handing over a small envelope. Unmarked, sealed with plain wax. The captain opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. Short, precise. Thank you for trusting silence when noise would have made it worse. You were never meant to carry the truth, only to guide it. Echo 12 Blue, beneath the message was a printed map. A flight path reroute stamped with a red line. Not part of their original route. The captain traced it with his finger, realizing it had led them around something, not toward something, as if the girl had used the entire plane and herself as a decoy. She protected us, he whispered. The co-pilot looked at him confused. From what? From being seen, the captain said. From being followed. Back on the military base, surveillance footage showed something unusual during the plane's landing. A flash of light had appeared above the clouds, not caught by radar, but visible in the infrared recordings. A large shape, circular and slow-moving, almost blending into the sky. It had vanished the moment the aircraft touched down. The data was flagged and removed by an unknown team within 2 hours. All copies were erased, all memory cards destroyed. The tower logs were wiped. The flight would be listed as delayed due to instrument failure. Nothing more. 3 weeks later, the captain received a letter at his home. There was no return address, no name, just a seal. The same symbol the girl had worn on her shoulder patch. Twin wings with a small number beneath. Inside the envelope was a photo taken from inside the plane. It showed the girl in seat 21A staring quietly out the window before everything happened. But there was something strange in the image. Reflected in the airplane glass next to her face was a faint outline of the hovering object, just visible enough to give you chills. On the back of the photo, a line was written in soft pencil. Some things watch us not to harm, but to remember. The captain folded the photo and placed it inside his flight logbook. He never spoke publicly about the flight again. Neither did the co-pilot or the marshals or the passengers. Some stories don't get shared on news channels or written into reports. Some stories are carried in silence, passed only to those who were there. And sometimes high above the clouds, when radar screens blink strangely or radio signals drop for a second, a few pilots still whisper a name not found on any crew list. Echo 12 Blue, the one whose presence made the F-22s break radio silence. The one who was never supposed to be seen, but still saved everyone on board.